The fictional character Spider-Man, a comic book superhero featured in Marvel Comics publications, has appeared in 6 live-action films since his inception. The first film was an American-made-for-television film that premiered on CBS in 1977. It was directed by E.W. Swackhamer and starred Nicholas Hammond and Thayer David. The rights to further motion picture films based on Spider-Man were purchased in 1985 and moved through various production companies and studios, before being secured by Sony Pictures Entertainment. Sony hired Sam Raimi to direct Spider-Man and its sequels, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3. Through the films, Peter Parker developed a relationship with his high school crush Mary Jane Watson, and as Spider-Man, battled villains such as the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, the New Goblin, the Sandman, and Venom. The first 2 films were met with positive reviews from critics, while the third film met mixed reviews. While a sequel to Spider-Man 3 was in development, Sony announced that the franchise would instead be rebooted. Mark Webb was hired to direct the reboot, which featured a new cast including Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker, Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy, and Rhys Ifans as Dr. Kurt Connors. The reboot's intention was to have Peter Parker develop his abilities in high school once again. The reboot, The Amazing Spider-Man, was released in 2012 and a sequel, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, was released in 2014. The reboot and the sequel were met with mixed to positive reviews. Raimi's trilogy, produced on a total budget of $597 million, grossed nearly $2.5 billion worldwide, while Webb's films were produced on a total budget of $480 million and grossed over $1.4 billion. The Spider-Man films are the 6th highest-grossing film franchise of all time, having grossed over $3.7 billion. Development, television films. In 1977, the pilot episode of The Amazing Spider-Man television series was released by Columbia Pictures as a feature film outside of the United States. In 1978, episodes from the television series were re-edited and released outside of the United States as a feature film titled Spider-Man Strikes Back. In 1979, a film made using the same method was released as Spider-Man, The Dragon's Challenge. The disappointing performance of 1983's Superman 3 made comic book adaptations low priority in Hollywood, though the comic industry itself thrived. Canon Films. In 1985, after a brief option on Spider-Man by Roger Corman expired, Marvel Comics optioned the property to Canon Films. Canon chiefs Menahem Golan and his cousin Yoram Globus agreed to pay Marvel Comics $225,000 over the 5-year option period plus a percentage of the film unregistered trademark S revenues. The rights would revert to Marvel if a film was not made by April 1990. Tobe Hooper, then preparing both Invaders from Mars and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, was mooted as director. Golan and Globus misunderstood the concept of the character and instructed writer Leslie Stevens, creator of The Outer Limits, to write a treatment reflecting their misconception. In Stevens' unregistered trademark story, a corporate scientist intentionally subjects ID badge photographer Peter Parker to radioactive bombardment, transforming him into a hairy, suicidal, 8-armed monster. The human tarantula refuses to join the scientist unregistered trademark S new master race of mutants, battling a succession of mutations kept in a basement laboratory. Unhappy with the debasement of his comic book creation, Marvel unregistered trademark S Stan Lee pushed for a new story and screenplay, written for Canon by Ted Newsom and John Bransato. The variation on the origin story had Otto Octavius as a teacher and mentor to a college-age Peter Parker. The cyclotron accident which creates Spider-Man also deforms the scientist into Dr. Octopus and results in his mad pursuit of proof of the Fifth Force. Ock reconstructs his cyclotron and causes electromagnetic abnormalities, anti-gravity effects, and bilocation which threatens to engulf New York and the world. Joseph Zito, who had directed Canon on unregistered trademark S successful Chuck Norris film Invasion USA, replaced Tobe Hooper. The new director hired Barney Cohen to rewrite the script. Cohen, creator of TV's Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Forever Knight, added action scenes, a non-canonical comic for the villain, gave Doc Ock the catchphrase, "Okie dokie," and altered his goal from the Fifth Force to a quest for anti-gravity. Producer Golan then made a minor polish to Cohen's rewrite. Zito scouted locations and studio facilities in both the US and Europe, and oversaw storyboard breakdowns supervised by Harper Goff. Cannon planned to make the film on the then substantial budget of between $15 and $20 million. While no casting was finalized, Zito expressed interest in actor stuntman Scott Lever, who had posed for Cannon's promotional photos and ads, and made public appearances as Spider-Man for Marvel. The up-and-coming actor Tom Cruise was also discussed for the leading role. Zito considered Bob Hoskins as Doc Ock. Stan Lee expressed his desire to play Daily Bugle editor J. Jonah Jameson. Lauren Bacall and Katharine Hepburn were considered for Aunt May, Peter Cushing as a sympathetic scientist, and Adolph Caesar as a police detective. With Cannon finances siphoned by the expensive Superman 4, The Quest for Peace and Masters of the Universe, the company slashed the proposed Spider-Man budget to under $10 million. Director Zito opted out, unwilling to make a compromise Spider-Man. The company commissioned low-budget rewrites from writers Shepard Goldman, Don Michael Paul, and finally Ethan Wiley, and penciled in company workhorse Albert Pyun as director, who also made script alterations. Scott Lever was still associated with the character through Marvel, and read each draft. Lever commented, Ted Newsom and John Bransato had written the script. It was good but it needed a little work. Unfortunately, with every subsequent rewrite by other writers, it went from good to bad to terrible. Due to Cannon's assorted financial crises, the project shut down after spending about $1.5 million on the project. In 1989, Path the copyright, owned by corrupt Italian financier Giansalo Peretti, acquired the overextended Cannon. The filmmaking cousins parted, Globus remaining associated with Path the copyright, Golan leaving to run 21st Century Film Corporation, keeping a number of properties in lieu of a cash buyout. He also extended his Spider-Man option with Marvel up to January 1992. Golan shelved the low-budget rewrites and attempted to finance an independent production from the original big-budget script, already budgeted, storyboarded and laid out. At Cannes in May 1989, 21st Century announced a September start date, with ads touting the script by Barney Cohen, Ted Newsom and John Bransato and Joseph Goldman. As standard practice, Golan pre-sold the unmade film to raise production funds, with television rights bought by Viacom and home video rights by Columbia Pictures, which wanted to establish a studio franchise. Stephen Herc was attached as director at this point. Golan submitted this new screenplay to Columbia in late 1989 and the studio requested yet another rewrite. Golan hired Frank LaLoggia, who turned in his draft but grew disenchanted with 21st Century. Neil Rottenberg was hired for one more draft, which was also covered by script readers at Columbia. Columbia unregistered trademark script analysts considered all three submissions essentially the same story. A tentative production deal was set. Said Stan Lee in 1990, 21st Century is supposed to do Spider-Man and now they're talking to Columbia and the way it looks now, Columbia may end up buying Spider-Man from 21st Century. Carolco Pictures, 21st Century unregistered trademark Esmaneum Golan still actively immersed himself mounting his Spider-Man, sending the original Doc Ock script for production bids. In 1990, he contacted Canadian effects company Light and Motion Corporation regarding the visual effects, which in turn offered the stop-motion chores to Stephen Archer. Toward the end of shooting True Lies, Variety carried the announcement that Carolco Pictures had received a completed screenplay from James Cameron. This script bore the names of James Cameron, John Bransato, Ted Newsom, Barry, Sid Cohen and Joseph Goldmari, a typographical scrambling of Golan's pen name with Marvel executive Joseph Calamari. The script text was identical to the one Golan submitted to Columbia the previous year, with the addition of a new 1993 date. Cameron stalwart Arnold Schwarzenegger was frequently linked to the project as the director's choice for Dr. Octopus. James Cameron's script meant, Months later, James Cameron submitted an undated 47-page script month with an alternate story, part screenplay, part narrative story outline. The script month told the Spider-Man origin, but used variations on the comic book characters Electro and Sandman as villains. This Electro was a megalomaniacal parody of corrupt capitalists. Instead of Flint Marko's character, Cameron unregistered trademark as Sandman is mutated by an accident involving Philadelphia experiment-style bilocation and atom mixing, in lieu of getting caught in a nuclear blast on a beach. The story climaxes with a battle atop the World Trade Center and had Peter Parker revealing his identity to Mary Jane Watson. In addition, the treatment was also heavy on profanity, and had Spider-Man and Mary Jane having sex. This treatment reflected elements in previous scripts, from the Stevens treatment, organic web shooters, and a villain who tempts Spider-Man to join a coming master race of mutants. From the original screenplay and rewrite, weird electrical storms causing blackouts, freak magnetic events and B-location. From the Ethan Wiley draft, a villain addicted to toxic superpowers and multiple experimental spiders, one of which escapes and bites Peter, causing an hallucinatory nightmare invoking Franz Kafka unregistered trademark S. The Metamorphosis. From the Frank LaLoggia script, a blizzard of stolen cash fluttering down onto surprised New Yorkers. And from the Neil Ruttenberg screenplay, a criminal assault on the NYC Stock Exchange. In 1991, Carolco Pictures extended Galani unregistered trademark S option agreement with Marvel through May 1996, but in April 1992, Carolco ceased active production on Spider-Man due to continued financial and legal problems. Litigation: when James Cameron agreed to make Spider-Man, Carolco lawyers simply used his previous Terminator 2 contract as a template. A clause in this agreement gave Cameron the right to decide on movie and advertising credits. Show business trade articles and advertisements made no mention of Golan, who was still actively assembling the elements for the film. In 1993, Golan complained publicly and finally instigated legal action against Carolco for disavowing his contractual guarantee credit as producer. On the other hand, Cameron had the contractual right to decide on credits. Eventually, Carolco sued Viacom and Columbia to recover broadcast and home video rights, and the two studios countersued. 20th Century Fox, though not part of the litigation, contested Cameron unregistered trademark S participation, claiming exclusivity on his services as a director under yet another contract. In 1996, Carolco, 21st Century, and Marvel went bankrupt. Via a quitclaim from Carolco dated March 28, 1995, MGM acquired 21st Century's film library and assets, and received all rights in and to all drafts and versions of the screenplay, S, for Spider-Man written by James Cameron, Ted Newsom and John Bransato, Menahem Golan, John, Sig Michael Paul, Ethan Wiley, Leslie Stevens, Frank LaLoggia, Neil Ruttenberg, Barney Cohen, Shepard Goldman and any and all other writers. MGM also sued 21st Century, Viacom, and Marvel Comics, alleging fraud in the original deal between Canon and Marvel. In 1998, Marvel emerged from bankruptcy with a reorganization plan that merged the company with Toybiz. The courts determined that the original contract of Marvel's rights to Golan had expired, returning the rights to Marvel, but the matter was still not completely resolved. In 1999, Marvel licensed Spider-Man rights to Columbia, a subsidiary of Sony Pictures Entertainment. MGM disputed the legality, claiming it had the Spider-Man rights via Canon, 21st Century, and Carolco. Columbia Pictures. In the meantime, MGM UA chief executive John Calley moved to Columbia Pictures. Intimately familiar with the legal history of producer Kevin McAuley unregistered trademark S claim to the rights to both Thunderball and other related James Bond characters and elements, Calley announced that Columbia would produce an alternate 007 series, based on the McClure material, which Calley acquired for Columbia. Both studios now faced rival projects, which could undercut their own long-term financial stability and plans. Columbia had no consistent movie franchise, and had sought Spider-Man since 1989. MGM wore unregistered trademark's only reliable source of theatrical income was a new James Bond film every 2 or 3 years. An alternate 007 series could diminish or even eliminate the power of MGM wore unregistered trademark's long-running Bond series. Likewise, an MGM UA Spider-Man film could negate Columbia unregistered trademark's plans to create an exclusive cash cow. Both sides seemed to have strong arguments for the rights to do such films. The two studios made a trade-off in March 1999. Columbia relinquished its rights to create a new 007 series in exchange for MGM's giving up its claim to Spider-Man. Columbia acquired the rights to all previous scripts in 2000, but exercised options only on the Cameron material, that is, both the completed multi-author screenplay and a subsequent scriptment. After more than a decade of attempts, Spider-Man truly went into production and all of the Spider-Man films were distributed by Columbia Pictures, the primary film production holding of Sony. The first 3 were directed by Sam Raimi, and the reboot was directed by Mark Webb. Laura Ziskin served as producer until her death in 2011. Sam Raimi series, Spider-Man. Spider-Man follows Peter Parker, an orphaned high schooler who pines after popular girl next door Mary Jane Watson. While on a science class field trip, Peter is bitten by a genetically engineered super spider. As a result, Peter gains superhuman abilities, including increased strength, speed, and the abilities to scale walls and generate organic webbing. After his beloved Uncle Ben is murdered, a murder Peter could have easily prevented, the teenager realizes that he must use his newfound abilities to protect New York City. Meanwhile, wealthy industrialist Norman Osborn, the father of Peter's best friend Harry Osborn, subjects himself to an experimental performance-enhancing serum, which creates a psychotic and murderous split personality. Donning a military battlesuit, Norman becomes a freakish Green Goblin, who begins to terrorize the city. Peter, as Spider-Man, now must do battle with the Goblin, all while trying to express his true feelings for Mary Jane. Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 picks up 2 years after the events of the first film. Struggling to balance both his superhero life and private civilian life, Peter still pines after Mary Jane, who is now engaged, and Harry continues to thirst for revenge against Spider-Man. As the stress of his dual life causes Peter's superpowers to wane, the hero must contend with the presence of Otto Octavius, a.k.a. Dr. Octopus, a mad scientist with 4 mechanical tentacles fused to his spine who sets out to recreate a dangerous fusion-based experiment that could destroy half of New York City. As the villain rampages across the city, Peter must choose between living the normal life he desires or committing to his responsibility to protect New York as Spider-Man. Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3 picks up months after the events of the second film. The film finds Peter basking in the spotlight as Spider-Man, and finding a balance between being a superhero and being with his love, Mary Jane Watson. Harry finally decides to take his revenge by setting up Mary Jane, then becomes the new Goblin like his father the original Green Goblin, and threatens the elements in Peter's life. Eddie Brock, another photographer for The Bugle, sets out on a mission to defame Spider-Man and incriminate him. Flint Marko, an escaped convict, falls into a particle accelerator and becomes a shape-shifting sand monster later known as Sandman. He sets out to steal money for his chronically ill daughter. Peter later learns that Marko is the one that killed Uncle Ben, causing Peter's own dark intentions to grow. This vendetta is enhanced by the appearance of the mysterious black alien symbiotic substance that bonds to Peter, resulting in the formation of a new, jet-black costume. Once Peter separates himself from the alien, it finds a new host in the form of Brock, resulting in the creation of Venom. Unproduced and cancelled films, Spider-Man 4. In 2008, Spider-Man 4 entered development, with Raimi attached to direct and Maguire, Dunst and other cast members set to reprise their roles. Both a fourth and a fifth movie were planned, and at one time the idea of shooting the 2 sequels concurrently was under consideration. However, Raimi stated in March 2009 that only the fourth film was in development at that time and that if there were fifth and sixth films, those two films would actually be a continuation of each other. James Vanderbilt was hired in October 2008 to pen the screenplay after initial reports in early 2008 that Sony Pictures was in contact with David Koepp, who wrote the first Spider-Man film. The script was subsequently rewritten by playwright David Lindsay Abai and rewritten again by Gary Ross in October 2009. Sony also engaged Vanderbilt to write scripts for Spider-Man 5 and Spider-Man 6. In 2008, Raimi expressed interest in portraying the transformation of Dr. Curt Connors into his villainous alter ego, the Lizard. The character's actor Dylan Baker and producer Grant Curtis were also enthusiastic about the idea. Raimi also discussed his desire to upgrade Bruce Campbell from a cameo appearance to a significant role. It was reported in December 2009 that John Malkovich was in negotiations to play Vulture and that Anne Hathaway would play Felicia Hardy, though she would not have transformed into the Black Cat as in the comics. Instead, Raimi's Felicia was expected to become a new superpowered figure called the Vulturess. However, several years later Raimi stated that Anne Hathaway was going to be Black Cat if Spider-Man 4 had been made. As disagreements between Sony and Raimi threatened to push the film off the intended May 6, 2011 release date, Sony Pictures announced in January 2010 that plans for Spider-Man 4 had been cancelled due to Raimi's withdrawal from the project. Raimi reportedly ended his participation due to his doubt that he could meet the planned May 6, 2011 release date while at the same time upholding the film creatively. He admitted that he was very unhappy with the way Spider-Man 3 had turned out, and was under pressure to make the fourth film the best that he could. Raimi purportedly went through 4 iterations of the script with different screenwriters and still hated it. Venom. In July 2007, Avi Arad revealed a Venom spin-off was in the works. The studio commissioned Jacob Aronofsky to write a script, but rejected it the following year. In September 2008, Paul Wernick and Rit Rees signed on to write. Stan Lee signed on to make a cameo in the film. Rit Rees later revealed that they had written 2 drafts for the film and that the studio was pushing the film forward. In 2009, Gary Ross, who was then rewriting the latest draft of the unproduced Spider-Man 4, was assigned to rewrite the Venom script and direct the movie, in which Venom would be an anti-hero rather than a supervillain. In March 2012, Chronicle director Josh Trank negotiated with Sony about his interest in directing the film after Ross left development to direct The Hunger Games. In June 2012, The Amazing Spider-Man producer Matt Tolmge, speaking of his and fellow producer Avi Arad's next project, a Venom movie, suggested it could follow the shared universe model of the film The Avengers. What I'm trying to say to you without giving anything away is hopefully all these worlds will live together in peace someday. Mark Webb series, The Amazing Spider-Man. Simultaneously with the cancellation of Spider-Man 4, Sony announced that the franchise would be rebooted with a new director and new cast. The Amazing Spider-Man was released on July 3, 2012 in 3D and IMAX 3D, and is intended to focus on Peter Parker developing his abilities in high school. Sony also confirmed that James Vanderbilt would write the script for the new film and Mark Webb, whose previous film Days of Summer was his directorial debut, would direct the reboot. Entertainment Weekly called Vanderbilt's script gritty, contemporary, and referenced Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan's reboot of the Batman film series, which also reinvented the tone of the series. The cast includes Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy, and Rhys Ifans as Dr. Curt Connors. Merchandising rights were sold by Sony to Disney Consumer Products in 2011, in exchange for full participation in the films themselves. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Series co-star Emma Stone said The Amazing Spider-Man will be the first in what is envisioned as a new series. Columbia Pictures said in March 2011 that it had contracted James Vanderbilt to write a sequel to The Amazing Spider-Man, and by April 2012, Sony had contracted Alex Kurtzman, Roberto Orci, and Jeff Pinkner to rewrite the sequel. In August 2011, nearly a year before The Amazing Spider-Man's release, Sony announced a sequel release date of May 2, 2014. Star Andrew Garfield said days before the release of The Amazing Spider-Man that, if we do a sequel, I hope I can do it. I hope they'd let me do it. They already have a release date for the second one, but no script. So we have our priorities in order. On September 14, 2012, it was confirmed that Garfield will return to the role and that Mark Webb will return as director. A second sequel is also expected. J.K. Simmons, who portrayed J. Jonah Jameson in Raimi's trilogy, expressed interest in returning to the role. On October 10, 2012, it was announced that Shailene Woodley was offered the role of Mary Jane Watson for the first sequel. Woodley was cast as Mary Jane Watson, but with a small role in the second film, and a larger role planned for the third film. However, it was announced on June 19, 2013, that Mary Jane was cut from the film and moved to the sequel in order to streamline the story and focus on the relationship between Garfield's and Stone's characters. On November 1, 2012, it was announced that Jamie Foxx was in early talks to play the role of Electro in the second film. Later it was confirmed he will be playing the character. On November 16, 2012, it was revealed that Harry Osborn will appear in the film. On December 3, 2012, Mark Webb revealed that Dane DeHaan was cast in the role. In February 2013, it was announced that Paul Giamatti will play the Rhino and Chris Cooper will play Norman Osborn. Future. In June 2013, Sony Pictures announced it had set release dates for the next two Spider-Man films. A third film is scheduled to be released on June 10, 2016, and a fourth is scheduled to be released on May 4, 2018. Paul Giamatti confirmed that Rhino will return in the third film. That November, Sony Pictures Entertainment chief Michael Linton told analysts, we do very much have the ambition about creating a big universe around Spider-Man. There are a number of scripts in the works. Andrew Garfield stated that his contract is for 3 films, and is unsure of his involvement for the fourth film. On December 12, 2013, Sony issued a press release through the viral site, Electro arrives, announcing that 2 films were in development, with Alex Kurtzman, Roberto Orci and Ed Solomon writing a spin-off focused on Venom and Drew Goddard writing one focused on the villain team Sinister Six with an eye to direct. Hannah Minghella and Rachel unregistered trademark Connor will oversee the development and production of these films for the studio. In February 2014, Sony announced that Webb would return to direct the third Amazing Spider-Man film. In March 2014, Webb stated that he would not be directing the fourth film, but would like to remain as a consultant for the series. In April 2014, it was announced that Goddard will direct the Sinister Six film as well, and that both spin-offs would release before a fourth Amazing Spider-Man, with Spider-Man potentially appearing in both spin-offs. Later in the month, Tom Chandarad revealed the Sinister Six film would be a redemption story and that the film's lineup might differ from the comics. On July 11, 2014, Orci told IGN that he's not working on the third film due to the third Star Trek film. Kurtzman revealed in an interview that the third film is still continuing production and there's a possibility of seeing a Black Cat film. On July 23, 2014, Sony Pictures announced that the Sinister Six is scheduled for release on November 11, 2016, while The Amazing Spider-Man 3 will be pushed back to 2018. By August 2014, Sony was also looking to release a female-centered spin-off film in 2017, with Lisa Joy Nolan writing, and had given the Venom spin-off the potential title of Venom Carnage. Cast and characters: Stan Lee and Bruce Campbell have both appeared in films in cameo appearances. Lee, one of the co-creators of Spider-Man, has appeared in all films except the 1977 film. In Spider-Man he was a bystander who grabs a young girl from falling debris during the battle between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin in Times Square. For Spider-Man 2, he appears once again as a bystander, this time saving a woman from falling debris during a battle between Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus, while in Spider-Man 3, he was a man on the street talking to Peter Parker. In the web series, Lee appears as a librarian in The Amazing Spider-Man listening to music on his headphones while stamping books, oblivious to the ongoing battle, and a graduation guest in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Campbell, a longtime colleague of Sam Raimi, appeared in all three of his films. In Spider-Man, he was the announcer at the wrestling ring Peter and gives him the name Spider-Man instead of the name the human spider that Peter wanted to be introduced as. In Spider-Man 2, he was an usher who refuses to let Peter enter the theater for Mary Jane's play when arriving late. For Spider-Man 3, Campbell appears as a French more registered trademark to D. Reception, Academy Awards. Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 were both nominated for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, which Spider-Man 2 won. Spider-Man was also nominated for the Academy Award for Best Sound Editing and Spider-Man 2 for the Academy Award for Best Sound. Box office performance. The first three Spider-Man films set new opening day records in North America in their opening weekend. The films are among the top of North American rankings of films based on Marvel Comics, with Spider-Man ranking second, Spider-Man 2 ranking third, and Spider-Man 3 ranking fourth. In North America, Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3 are ranked third, fourth and fifth for all superhero films, with the third film ranking fifth worldwide for superhero films. Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3 are the most successful films produced by Sony Columbia Pictures in North America. Critical response. David Anzen of Newsweek enjoyed Spider-Man as a fun film to watch, though he considered Spider-Man 2 to be a little too self-important for its own good. Anzen saw Spider-Man 3 as a return to form, finding it the most grandiose chapter and the nuttiest. Tom Charity of CNN appreciated the film's solidly redemptive moral convictions, also noting the vast improvement of the visual effects from the first film to the third. While he saw the second film's Doc Ock as the most engaging villain, he applauded the third film's Sandman as a triumph of CGI wizardry. Richard Corliss of Time enjoyed the action of the films and thought that they did better than most action movies by rethinking the characters, the franchise and the genre. Colin Cover of the Star Tribune praised Spider-Man as a superb debut of the superhero as well as Spider-Man 2 as a superior sequel for filmgoers who are fans of spectacle and of story. Cover expressed disappointment in Spider-Man 3 as too ambitious with the multiple storylines leaving one feeling overstuffed yet shortchanged. Manila Dargis of the New York Times enjoyed the humor of the first two films, but found it missing in the third installment. Dargis also noted, "The bittersweet paradox of this franchise is that while the stories have grown progressively less interesting, the special effects have improved tremendously." Robert Dienestein of the Rocky Mountain News ranked the films from his favorite to his least favorite, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man, and Spider-Man 3. While Dienestein missed the presence of Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus from the second film, he found the third film despite being bigger, though not necessarily better to have a satisfying conclusion. Home media release. All three films were released on DVD, the first two being released exclusively as two-disc sets, with the third film being released in both single and two-disc editions. All three films were later packaged in a motion picture DVD trilogy box set. Spider-Man 3 was initially the only Spider-Man film to be released individually on the high-definition Blu-ray format. The first two films were made available on Blu-ray, but only as part of a box set with the third film, called Spider-Man, the high-definition trilogy. The first two films lacked the bonus features from the DVDs, although Spider-Man 2 did contain both cuts of the movie. Sony announced on April 2, 2012 that the three films would be re-released on June 12, 2012. The DVDs of the first two movies reinstated a selection of the bonus features missing from the earlier Blu-ray releases, although the Spider-Man 3 reissue did not include the bonus disc of additional special features that appeared on earlier Blu-ray releases. All three films which comprise the Raimi trilogy are available in the US on iTunes. References. External links: Spider-Man film franchise overview at Box Office Mojo, Spider-Man film series at AllMovie.